In this tutorial, we'll start customizing our page builder experience by creating a custom component. This component is going to be a bit more of an advanced component because it's going to be loading data from a third-party API and then displaying it inside Webiny. And on top of that, this component has several settings that expose different options in terms of what data you want to get back from that API. To better follow along this tutorial, I recommend you go to our Webiny documentation portal. On the page builder, there's an article called Create a Custom Page Element. And this is what we're going to be doing on this exact tutorial. To get started, let's copy this command, and back in our project and in our terminal, again, let's just make sure we don't have any watch commands running. We're going to install an extension. Let's press enter. Wait for the extension to get downloaded and linked. There we go. You'll find that extension on the SpaceX element. It's an extension that adds a specific capabilities to the admin interface. That is, it registers a page builder plugin for the page editor. We're going to go into the code and the details of that extension in a bit, but for this first part of the tutorial, we want to just see how the extension works and behaves. So now that the extension has been installed, let's run a watch command. Yarn Webiny watch admin nav admin. Let's wait for the watch to start. Okay, now that we have watch up and running, let's go to the page builder. So we're on localhost, and on the page builder, we're going to click new page and use the blank template, and we're going to start with an empty block. And into this block, we're going to add this new component that introduced a group called media, and then in there we have a SpaceX page element. What this component does is it hooks into a third-party API, which has a list of different rockets that SpaceX provides, and fetches those rockets, their descriptions and links to the Wikipedia page, and displays them inside a page builder page. So it's a dynamic component, and alongside that, as I mentioned, it exposes certain configuration options we can see here. So do we want rockets, do we want dragons in this case, and how many? Let's say, hey, we want 2, and we don't want to do any offset. I want to save. There we go. And we got 2 dragons. If you want to go back to rockets, say, let's offset by 1. Also want 2. There you go. So as you can see, you can get different data quickly into Webiny. And because this is, again, a React component, you have full control over inside the React component itself how the visuals look like. But because this is also wrapped inside a page builder component, you can add specific things around this component. You can define height, width, margin, padding. And we can also have a look at, for example, let's say we want to insert an additional settings, I don't know, let's say border or whatnot, to this element. We're going to explore how we can do that. If we try to preview our page, we'll just do that, you'll see we get a blank page. And this is actually expected because when you click the preview button, it sends you to the deployed instance on AWS to render this page. That deployed instance doesn't yet have this plugin available, so it doesn't know how to render it. The way to get around that is, well, we got 2 options. One is that we deploy our code. So instead of using the watch command, we want to run the deploy command. this is okay if we're ready to deploy it, right? But since we want to make some changes to this code and so on, we want to actually keep it locally and run it through the watch. So to get the preview, let's move back to our editor, and in one window, we have the watch still running for the admin. However, the preview capability is provided by the website application. So we need to run another watch command in the other terminal window to watch the website. So yarn Webiny watch website. Let's wait for the watch to start. The website watch is going to run another server on a different port to the admin port, but that's going to allow us to preview our pages using our theme, using our template and everything. So we have localhost 3000 now alongside localhost 3001, which runs admin. So we go here on the preview, do the same thing as before, just we replace our URL with the localhost 3000 and run that. You see we get our website with our theme displaying the component that we added to our page. So now we have a watch running on admin and we have a watch running on the website, which allows us to preview both the new component in the page builder editor as well as on our website. Next, we're going to start exploring the code and alongside that, making some changes to it and see how they reflect back in the page builder. Let's go back to our editor to explore the code that this extension installed. So under extensions, SpaceX element is where we're going to find all of the code. When it comes to the extensions for page builder editor, those extensions always have two parts to them. One part registers the component inside the page builder editor, and the other part registers it with the website. The reason is why those are divided into two different parts is because when we drop an extension inside the page builder editor, that extension can render slightly differently than on the website. It doesn't need to, but it's in our control to have that if needed. But also the extension inside the editor has data bindings, has additional settings attached to it and so on, which the one on the website doesn't. So in this example, we have our website extension that's loaded here. It's a pretty simple way to register an extension with a website, which is needed to then render the extension on the page. So we include our component. We're going to dive deeper into this file in a minute. But in the essence, we just need this library here, this component here from this package, and in there we just register it like so. And this is all it's needed to render the custom component on our website. When it comes to the admin part, which is the one that registers the component with the page builder editor, there's a bit more to this. So first of all, what we're doing here is, hey, we need to tell the admin and the page builder editor as well how to render that component. And then alongside that, we are registering all of the settings for that component, which is, hey, we're giving it an element type. We're saying, hey, in the toolbar, that's the left-hand side that opens, where should it be positioned? It's positioned inside the media group. What is the title? And how does that little preview box look like for this extension? What settings on the right-hand toolbar can we use for this particular extension? The target defines when we drag and drop our custom plugin, where can we drop it? Because sometimes you can say, hey, I can only drop things inside a cell, sometimes inside a cell and a block, or you can even say, hey, this can only be dropped inside an accordion, right? Or if you're building a more complex component where you have parent-child relationships through the target, you can control that. When we are create, that is when we add the component to the page, what we want to happen. We want the settings drawer to open, and when the component is created, what do? We want to just initialize some basic data, which is, hey, we got our variables attribute. That's an object, and inside there we have a type, limit, and offset. We'll see those how we use those in a second. And lastly, what advanced settings do we want to show for this plugin? This is, let's open this file. So this is that right-hand side drawer where we specify the query parameters. So remember those variables where we have variables.type, .limit, .offset. So those are used here. Variable type, variable.type, variables.limit, and variables.offset. So here essentially we have a form with data bindings to those variables and some inputs. So whenever we change and press submit, those settings get saved and sent back to our component. And now let's look at the last bit, which is the component itself. It's pretty straightforward. We have an endpoint from which we are fetching data. We have two queries, one to fetch rockets and the other one to fetch dragons, some TypeScript definitions. And then this is essentially the core method, create renderer. This is the method that is imported from Webiny App Page Builder elements. And in there, we have the use renderer, which gives us access to the get element. And from the element, we have access to our variables, limit, offset, and type. So this is a typical pattern you're going to do in all of your custom components that have any sorts of settings, custom settings attached to them. Then we have a very handful utility that we expose as well called useLoader. It's on the same package as the other two methods. The useLoader allows us to perform data loading. So here is where we're doing our GraphQL query, but you could do a query to a REST endpoint, do any sort of API requests in here. The cool thing about this utility is that it exposes the cache key parameter, which tells us how do we cache the results from these queries, which is handy because it allows us to have a much more performant component, especially the components that do data fetching, as well as through here, we don't need to worry about if our component gets re-rendered or things like that. The useLoader will make sure that the data fetching is only performed when needed. It also gives us access to data error and loading. So if it's loading, well, we just display loading. If it's an error, we can show a user-friendly error message. If we don't have any data, we just show a message, nothing to show. And lastly, under the data, we will just render the rockets or dragons from the list that we got from our response from the loader. And this is where we display all of our data. Let's do a quick test now. Let's do one change. For example, we'll add the border settings to our component. Let's see how that reflects. So we're going to save this. This won't affect the website watch, but it will affect the admin watch. Okay, and let's have a look at our component now. So now we have the border setting on it. So we can say, hey, give me a border orange, right, with 10 pixels radius. All right, so now we've just added a new border setting, and let's say we don't need background height and width settings at all. So we can just comment those out. There we go. And if the hot reload doesn't kick in, just refresh it. Now we've removed those. Let's go back to the render component. Again, this render component is imported both on the admin side of things as well as the website. So any change we make here, it's going to show up both in the preview as well as in the admin. So let's do that. Let's say we want to add a divider here and change this so it says click for more info. And again, you can do CSS changes here, whatever you want, right? Here we immediately see the change kicking in. Again, we just need to do localhost 3000. We see that we've got the changes visible there as well. Let me show you a quick trick so you don't need to constantly change the preview address to localhost. So if you go back to the admin dashboard, if you go under the settings and page builder, here we got the website preview URL. If you change this to http localhost 3000 and save. Now if we go to page builder, pages, we got our custom page, and if we open the preview, it's going to use the localhost 3000, so no more the need to change the URL. One last thing I want to show you is if you want to have a look at how certain component for the page builder editor was built. For example, here we got more complex components. Grid is quite a complex component because it's got a child, a cell, and a parent, a grid. Accordion also has the ability, as well as tabs and carousel, to nest other components inside of them, alongside a few additional settings in the element toolbar. So if you ever want to know how we build some of those, the best way to do that is if you go to our GitHub repository, Webiny.js, under packages, and look for app page builder, and in there go to source, editor, plugins, and there, first of all, if you want to know how certain element settings work, like border, background, paddings, margins, stuff like that, you can explore each of these in here. And then for the actual elements, you go on the element. Let's say we want to see how the accordion element is registered, what settings it has, and some stuff like that. It's all available to you here to explore and use that as a reference point and as a best practice that you can then be making some of your components. Otherwise, we're going to wrap this tutorial up, and we're going to move to the next one where we're going to explore how the theming works in Page Builder.